Five-star preps here in Nashville, Tennessee with Ravenwood head coach Matt Daniels. His team's going to square off with the Maryville Rebels in the 6A state championship this weekend. Coach Daniels, first of all, for those of us that haven't seen Ravenwood play, starting off offensively, what's your offense look like? What's your kind of your cup of tea, if you will?
You know, we're a spread offense, run an RPO system. We've got a 3-year starting quarterback in Brian Garcia who runs the show for us. We feel like he can make plays with his legs and his arm, so everything kind of runs through him. We've got some really athletic pieces along the offensive line, some big athletic kids that help us in the zone running game. And then we've got a few guys that we can get the ball to. You know, Andrew Mason is one of the fastest high school football players I've seen. Can really stretch the defense, can kind of take the top off. We've got a couple of possession receivers, some role type players that have very sneakily been putting together some really good seasons. Ross Johnson, he's got 9 total touchdowns and over 600 yards receiving. He's a guy that certainly doesn't get a whole lot of mention, where people really don't know who he is, but he's capitalizing on that. A junior tight end who's a nightmare matchup. He's almost 6'7". His name's Jake Brenningstool. He's basically doubled up his production from regular season to postseason. He's had a phenomenal postseason run, 5 touchdowns, over 500 yards receiving in 4 postseason games. So we feel like we've got some good matchups that we can exploit. We've been a running back by committee in the backfield due to some injuries. Our starter, Tony Rice, has been hobbled by an ankle injury. So, you know, having some guys step up in his stead. Reggie Grimes has carried the ball a little bit. You know, he's mostly on the defensive side of the ball. Jordan Smith, a linebacker, stepped in and carried the ball a little bit. Connor Pace, a junior that we have, you know, had about 90 yards rushing last week. So that's been by committee. You know, different guys stepping up every week seemingly. But like I said, everything runs through Garcia, and he's confident and comfortable as a 3-year starter. And I think that confidence has boiled over to the rest of the offense. And you know, we feel like we're playing some pretty good football right now.
You mentioned Reggie Grimes. That's a name that sticks out to a lot of people that follow recruiting. Just committed to Oklahoma. Big dude. Just saw him over there in person the first time. But defensively, I know he's probably a key piece of that group, but schematically, what do you guys do? What do you hang your hat on defensively?
You know, we hang our hat on having a front seven that's really difficult to contend with. We've got speed and size up front there, and, you know, Reggie, Miles Dawson at nose tackle. Graham Barton, one of our big offensive linemen, has been playing both ways recently. Brian Rice, who was the Region Defensive Player of the Year last year. You know, several experienced linebackers, a Mike linebacker, Avery Miller, who's been calling the shots for the last 3 years. Junior Colson, a very highly touted recruit who's just a junior, really long guy that, you know, can run sideline to sideline. And then Jordan Smith, I mentioned before, got him back halfway through the season from an injury, and he's been lights out. He's one of those old school guys. You know, he's a sure tackler, never gets too high or too low emotionally, leads by example. Got a couple guys in the secondary that have been making some really good plays. Ben Severance is a junior returning as a starter from last year's semifinal team. As a sophomore, he's made tremendous strides, maturing as a football player. Damon Owens back there, and then we got a couple young corners. You know, we've been really rotating guys and seeing who's going to step up that particular game. So, but it all starts with the front seven. We operate out of a 3 and 4 down look, kind of depending on the game plan, and we can go in and out of that. Don't have to change personnel a whole lot, but we do have some sub packages where guys from both sides of the ball get involved. You know, relentless pursuit of the football has been kind of the theme this year, and seeing how many hats we can get to the football and make it difficult to get yards. When you make it difficult on the offense, every play to get yards, it wears on them, and eventually we're going to come out on top.
And, Coach, before we move on, got to ask you about your hair. We cover Farragut High School baseball that most of their kids bleach their hair every year come postseason time. So what happened with what you got going on?
So this is not the first time that something like this has happened with me. It came down to a bet with our student section. Did this a couple of years ago as well, but really the inspiration came from I played football at South Lake Carroll High School in outside of Dallas, Texas, and we had a tradition when we went to the playoffs at South Lake, and I'm not sure when it started, but it was before 2001 when I was a senior. that we would bleach our hair completely blonde. So that first playoff game, we'd take off our helmets for the national anthem, and the fans would be blinded by a whole bunch of bleach blonde hair. And wanted to continue some sort of tradition like that at Ravenwood, as far as bringing some excitement and just kind of some down to earth approach to the coaching staff and the students and fans. And a couple years ago, it was a Brentwood bet where they asked if I would blonde the tips of my hair. I did that, and then this year, just to kind of drum up some excitement for quarterfinals, semifinals, we went through kind of a stage of bets, and it was a mohawk first, and then it was dyeing it red, and now this week apparently I'm getting a raptor head shaved into the back of the mohawk, so we'll see how that works out. But it's been fun. It's something that the kids get a kick out of. They do their playoff haircuts, they do little mohawks and lines in the side of their head, so it's just something fun to embrace, and makes me feel a little bit younger than I am right now, but always good to see the kids smile about it. And when I took off my hat at the game on Friday night, I think I heard kind of a collective gasp coming from the home field stand. So it's pretty funny.
And moving on to your opponent in Cookeville, the Maryville Rebels, one of the better programs in the state of Tennessee and all of the South, really. This year's team trying to get a gold ball, hadn't got one in a couple of years. Probably a little more thirsty than they have been in the wild, but from what you've seen on film, what sticks out about Maryville? What are you going to have to do to contend with? What really strikes fear into the part of most opponents, I guess?
Well, I think they're very similar to us this year. The way that the roster is made up in terms of guys with experience, guys with measurables, and guys who just perform on Friday nights. So it's not quite like looking into a mirror, but it's pretty darn close in terms of offense and defensive schemes and production. Several big names on both sides of the ball that you got to worry about. You got to know where they are, and I feel like they're probably thinking the same thing about us. So kind of cool in the sense that similar programs. I mentioned this before to some other reporters, and you and I when we were talking off the air, is Maryville is a program that we want to emulate. They've had success for a long, long time, and Ravenwood's only been around for 17 years as a high school. This is our fifth state finals appearance. So when you think about how short of a time frame we've had, that's some pretty good success. We've had opportunities to earn two gold balls back in 05 and 15. So we feel like we're in the midst of building a tradition like Maryville has. Now we've got to do it for a long period of time. So it does not go over our guys' heads in terms of how much this means to match up with a program like Maryville. Our guys, our seniors, who are our leaders, they came in as freshmen in 2016, right after the 2015 state championship, which was against Maryville. So they've kind of had that in the back of their minds their whole high school career. This group of seniors was undefeated as freshmen and really kind of skipped the JV level because they were guys that were needed my first year as head coach in 2017 to contribute to varsity. So, Maryville is well coached. They've got dudes and they've got a community behind them. So, again, we see a lot of ourselves in them and can relate, and we know that they're going to play with passion. We know that they've prepared all offseason for this moment, just like we have. So I think it's a phenomenal matchup, on all those different layers. And it's a real honor to go up against a program like Maryville, because that's what I experienced in high school at Southlake. That's what I want for Ravenwood, and it's just really special to be a part of this game.
And you talk about that 2015 game. I remember Van Jefferson really sticking out about Ravenwood football back then. He's at Florida now, used to be at Ole Miss. One of the best high school receivers I've ever seen. Coach, I got to ask you, your time in Texas, your time in Tennessee, your time in Virginia, out of all the high school football players you've ever seen, coached against, played against, who sticks out to you as the best?
There's been a lot, and it's kind of hard to narrow down to one name. From my own playing experience, state semifinals matchup against Ennis High School outside of Dallas, a name, that you saw in the NFL. He's coaching now, played quarterback at Texas Tech. Graham Harrell was lucky enough to play against him in high school. He was a sophomore when I was a senior, but some of the throws he made and the things he did to command an offense as a sophomore, you knew that he was going to have a special career, and sure enough, he went on and did that at Texas Tech and bounced around a little bit in the NFL. But there's been a lot. I'm fortunate enough to coach some of those guys right now. I've had a lot of opposing coaches come up to me and talk about Brian Garcia and Andrew Mason in that same regard, because they're guys that just do certain things on the field that you've never seen before, and you certainly don't see week in and week out like those guys have been able to do. Heard a lot of good things about T. Hodge at Maryville, and some guys that we're going to play this weekend. So I think it's cool that our boys get to play against such good talent and competition, because 10, 15 years from now they'll be able to tell stories to their kids and their families about who they played with, who they played against, and that's all part of the experience.